All right, welcome everyone to the October Focus Series. Today we're focusing on enabling priority conversations. Benny, do you want to just give a
Yeah,
quick intro on the
absolutely.
Focus
Good
Series?
good day, everyone. I just thought let me just cut in there, Kirsty. I know it's a really busy time of the year. I mean, especially in the UK, I believe there's a very important budget speech coming up next week. And so maybe the thinking here is just to reaffirm what is the purpose of these sessions. And we think there is a lot of noise in financial planning, whether it's AI, regulations, tax, whatever. And the intention really of this focus series is to focus on what we think is the most important aspect in financial planning, certainly at the moment and going forward, and that is our client conversations. And so what we're going to just take a couple of minutes, like hopefully we can do it in 20 minutes once a month, where we just cut through all of that noise and just focus on how do we keep on strengthening and expanding our client conversations.
That's Yeah, so we'll keep it short and focused today as well. Today we're talking about priorities, and I know some of you have already seen the new feature that we added into Asset Map recently. It's fast becoming one of our most asked about and talks about feature, and planners sharing how they're using that feature to really connect with clients on what their priorities are and how that's impacting their financial plan. But before we jump into Asset Map and have a look at how this new feature works, I wanted to start by just talking a little bit about the why. And if we think about financial planning and how we approach it in our client engagement process, priorities is really very much at the center of everything that we do and really embedded in that process. Whether that's planning for a client's retirements and what sort of income they need, or it's planning for structural changes. Do they have a will in place? Who are the beneficiaries? What's the legacy look like? Or whether that's business planning, we're continuously engaging around what the priorities are for the clients and how that is, incorporated into the plan. But I wanted to start by sharing a little bit of research that we did, or sorry, that was done in the US in 2022, and it was done by the FPA. And I've put the link there if you want to go have a look at it. It's really interesting research and what came out of that, and lots of insights that we can take in, again, strengthening that gap with clients. But I wanted to draw your attention just to a small section of that research. And again, it was done in the US. They interviewed and surveyed CFP financial advisors as well as their top clients. And they asked them a series or range of statements. And they asked both for the planner and the clients if they could specify whether they disagree with the statement, either somewhat or strongly, or whether they somewhat or strongly agree with each of the different statements. And there was three in there that I think talks to this conversation around priorities. And those three were, planners' recommendations. The recommendations in my plan are based on the client's personal goals, needs, and priorities. So again, they asked the CFP planners and their top clients, do they agree or disagree with that statement? The planner helps the client identify meaningful personal goals. The planner must understand the client's values and priorities before delivering effective financial advice. But I'm going to open up, the results now, which shows what percentage of those CFP financial planners strongly agreed or somewhat agreed with each of those statements, and what percentage of their top clients somewhat agreed or strongly agreed. And I think you'll agree that the results are quite surprising and I guess insightful as well. If we look at that first one, planners said 90% of planners said they somewhat or strongly agree that their recommendations are based on the client's personal goals, needs, and priorities. Again, not sure what the other 10% said, but 90% said that. But then if we look at what the client's responses were, less than 50% somewhat or strongly agreed that the recommendations in their plan were based on their priorities and goals. And similarly for the other two questions, 87% of planners said that they help clients identify meaningful personal goals, whereas 49% of clients only agreed with that. So 51% did not agree that they were helped in identifying meaningful goals. And similarly with the third question as well. It's linked to the values and it's required to deliver that financial advice. And I think it's interesting to see that disconnect when we think about so much of the planning process is centered around priorities and goals for clients. Why are clients not agreeing or feeling that? And the big question is, how do we close that gap? And I think it's about clients really feeling seen and heard in that conversation, but it makes me think we need to sort of highlight priorities in our planning process and really surface it from being part of the client engagement process, but really bring it to the surface and make it memorable. And how we make that memorable for clients is by bringing them into the conversation. And that's why I think this feature is so exciting, because it's going to give us space to bring clients into that conversation, to work through their priorities with them, make it memorable for them, allow them to connect to them, and also connect to how that connects to their plan.
Percy, it just reminds me of
Yes,
our
please.
strap line. I don't know if the audience knows,
Yes.
but the strap line for Asset Map is reimagine financial planning. And so this slide, if anything, really illustrates that we really have to think about reimagining how we deliver financial planning to not end up in a situation like this.
And I think it's so interesting because, like I say, it's all there in the process already, but it's just how do we highlight, how do we surface, how do we have those really engaging conversations with clients in a way that they feel understood and empowered. Yeah. But the next question might be, well, when do I bring in this priorities conversation? And there are many places in the process where we could really highlight it, and probably multiple points in the journey that we could highlight priorities. But I wanted to just stick to two specific ideas around, where we could bring it in for new clients, and then also where we could bring it in for existing clients at that review stage. Now, if we think about, when we take on new clients in Asset Map, either via that discovery link or we're creating the map based on what we know about the clients. And the first conversation we have there is around unpacking where they are today. And one of the frameworks we use to enable that conversation is the 3 E's. So we want to be able to explore with the clients, we want to educate and elevate. And that's the process of just exploring what we see on the map. Tell me about the people that I see at the top here. Tell me about your journey or these different assets or investments that you have. What's the story behind them? But while we're exploring, we're educating and innovating. But the key point there is the outcome of that conversation is at the end of that conversation, we want to know, do we know who's important to the clients and who's impacted by the decisions they make? Do we have a clear understanding of their current picture and what they want to achieve? And I think this priorities discussion just fits really well in that discussion around, do we also explore what is it that they want to achieve? What are their priorities? And also what's the importance of those different priorities for that clients? And then if we think about existing clients and review, I think this is just a really great space to reflect back to the client. So, these are the priorities that I heard throughout our engagement. Are they still your priorities? Part of review is reflecting around what's changed for the client, what's changed in their life. And priorities fits nicely into unpacking what's changed from a priority point of view. Are these still your priorities? Have they changed? Do we need to add any? And which ones have we achieved? Really highlighting when we've achieved a specific priority. And so that's giving you some background into the why about this feature and where we think it could fit in. But without further ado, let's jump into the how. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and just share Asset Map. Great. All right, great. Should be able to see. Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right, so this is the James family. We've certainly got to know them well this year through the different webinars. But when you go into a household, you'll now see in this panel on the left-hand side, there's a new tab called Priorities. And you'll see it's notated with this little blue New button, so it's easy to spot. And when we select that, we go into this Priorities tab. Now, the first thing you'll see when you go in, we land on the Visual Importance tab, but it does give us a couple of options here, and I'll work through that together with you now. But what we can see right at the top on the front of this Priorities tab is that we can arrange the priorities into different categories. So they're either unassigned or they have been assigned either normal importance or high importance. So we can categorize the different priorities. And I really like this view for presenting it, kind of reflecting back. These are the priorities that we have, and unpacking that conversation around, are they still the same? Are they different? And do we need to change the importance? But before we do that with the client, we need to identify what is this client's priorities. And to do that, we can flip over into this identify tab. And you'll see when I move across here, there's a long list of potential priorities below here. And the reason we've included this list here is that often when you're having this conversation with the client, they may not know offhand exactly what their priorities are. But by viewing a list like this, and we've seen that in discovery as well, clients can then say, okay, I relate to that, or no, I don't relate to that, or yes, that is something I need to think about. And it gives you a starting point to really explore with the client what their priorities are. So you've got this library at the bottom to select from, and you can also, refine this library a little bit by seeing here how they've all been categorized. So you can look for most common. These are also the ones that you find in discovery, but you can also switch between these different categories and really focus in the conversation around a specific area and what the client's priorities are there. Now, there's a couple of ways to add a priority for a client. One of the ways I can do that is just by clicking on this little plus, and you'll see it pops up at the top here. If I open up that specific priority, you'll see that I can rename it. So while these priorities in the library tend to be quite broad, retirement planning, we want to make it really specific and unique for that client. So you can rename them. So maybe retirement planning is, it's sustaining our lifestyle. Retirement. So you can rename them to be exactly what's important for that client. And it might be that, retirement has 4 different goals or priorities that sit inside of that. So you can rename it to exactly what the client's words are, and you can assign it an importance. It's either normal or it's of high importance. You can also delete any priorities that are no longer required, and you can mark them as resolved if a specific priority has been resolved for a client. You can also put in notes. So any notes about that specific priority, you can add here into the notes tab and then update. You'll see it changes the name and puts those notes in. So that's one way of adding it. Or I can simply just click on this add button here where I can put in, perhaps it's cover IHT, and I can name the specific priority that the client has and then press create. So that's some of the ways to add it. Or I can select from any of the blocks below here. I can always click on other and name it whatever I want to call that specific priority. Or I can click into the search bar. And here I can just start typing what an individual's specific priority is. So perhaps it's updates will. And if it can't find one matching that, it just gives you this little add button here. And I can add it like that, and it pops up at the top here. So those are the different ways. So here you can really start selecting what are the specific priorities for a particular client and refine it, because it gives you an opportunity here. For example, if I think of legacy, when we're talking to a client, and this came up in the previous webinar as well about legacy, it can mean something different to every client. So we want to unpack that more and understand what does it mean for this client. And one of the ways I could do that is by selecting this legacy and charity block and seeing what other things sit inside that category and exploring that with the client. Is it more about philanthropy, or is it about, leaving a legacy for someone, or is it about structure? Are the documents all in place? And I can refine that. So once I've, identified all the different priorities for a client here, then I can pop across into this importance.
Can I just pause there for a second, Kirsty?
Yes.
You know what I just realized, and maybe it's like really obvious to everybody, and just I'm slow here, but my initial thought was this list is overwhelming. And certainly for clients, it will be overwhelming. But what I just realized, isn't this like a brilliant way to reflect the value of financial planning? In other words, it is very complex and it's very personal.
It's overwhelming.
And so if a client says it's overwhelming, say, but that is the value of dealing with a financial planner. These things are intricate and subtle. And I think just that that in other words, what I'm saying is how we present or reflect this, and the words we use around these things are really important. And it's another opportunity to really demonstrate our value to clients. In other words,
Mm,
how I introduce all of these things, I can say that's part of the value proposition to a client,
yes.
is helping to really identify areas of importance and
Mm,
prioritizing them. But you see the
yeah.
words we're using, that is my value
Yes.
to my client.
Yes, exactly. And then they really start to feel that, and that's where the power is, especially if renaming them and putting the words the client uses, and they can always connect with that and connect with their priorities and see how that connects with their plan. But once you've gone through this process of really just identifying and working through that with the client, what does it mean for them? Adding in the notes, any additional, thoughts about that specific goal, then you can move across to the importance tab. And here you'll see we still have, at the top here, the unassigned, normal, and high, where I can recategorize these priorities. And we've got the library at the bottom as well. So we can still add from the screen if need be, if something else pops up. But now I can start to drag these different priorities into the normal importance or the high. And I do that by just selecting these two little lines here. And that, let's say that's a very high priority for this client. Maybe this is also a high priority for the client, and updating the role. It's maybe a normal priority, but these are also high. And I can then determine, with the clients, what is of utmost high importance and what is of normal importance. I can also rearrange within each of these categories. So I can say, actually, this one is, the top importance, top high, number one, then I can move that up to the top. So you can see how this can be a really powerful conversation for new clients, and identifying what their priorities are, then working through the importance of each one for them. And even for an existing client, just reflecting, these are the priorities we had to, address immediately. They were high priorities. These are the ones we're going to be focusing on next. It's a great way of positioning what we're doing each year with the client as well. So that's the identify and the importance. Just want to mention a couple of things in here when you are updating each of these. You can put in, like I said, you can add in notes. And some of the feedback we've received already is, these priorities are set at a family or household level. But what if there's a specific priority for a individual in the household? So now what you can do is, because you can update this name, that's definitely feedback we've shared with the team, though, that we want to be able to assign it to members. But in the meantime, we can actually put it in the name. This is, for example, John's goal of providing a legacy, or there's a different goal for the spouse. And we can add in the other point that planners have raised is, I want to put in a due date. When is something, when is our plan to execute that specific priority and complete it? So for that, you can also put it in the name here, or you can pop over to the notes and add, specific due dates in here, or any additional notes. So that's just some workarounds for now, but we've shared that feedback with the team to be able to assign due dates and members to each of these. Okay, perfect. Then on this page, you can also turn the library off. And I quite like this once you've completed identifying the priorities for a client, to actually turn the library off and keep this view, very keen and precise around these are the priorities we've identified and the importance of each of them. I can also flip from this visual view to a list view, and that'll then just show all the active priorities with their importance, as well as any priorities that I've marked as resolved, so that we can always look back and reflect with the clients on what we have achieved over time. I can also edit priorities from here, and I can delete priorities straight from here. If we ever need to remove one of them, we can just click on that delete button. If I generate a report, I can click on this little PDF button here, and that'll generate this view as a standalone report. So just to give you an idea, this is what that will look like. It'll have, all the active priorities with their importance, and below that, it'll have all the resolved priorities. And that can also be included in your comprehensive report to the clients. Okay. And then how does priorities fit in with, say, other features like discovery? So now if you think about the discovery process, that's where we send a link to the client, they can open on any device, and they're taken through that client-friendly process where they complete, who are the people that are important to them, what are their assets, liabilities, and incomes, and lastly, what is top of mind for them. So I'm just going to jump across to a discovery here where I've completed the beginning stages, the individual and their financials, but you'll remember that on this screen, the client can fill in what they'd like to cover with you. So let's say it's retirement planning or caring for parents, providing a legacy. They'll select the ones that resonate with them and then press continue and all done. Now, once a client has completed that discovery link and filled in what those things are that are top of mind for them, we can now see that in the priorities tab. So if I go into, the household for that specific discovery link, and I go ahead and click on the priorities tab, there we can see the 3 that the client indicated. So immediately once the client's completed discovery, we can not only see their current picture and have a conversation exploring with them, what they completed there, but we can also explore their priorities with them. You mentioned retirement planning. Tell me what that looks like for you. Or you said the word legacy, which we know could mean a myriad of things. Let's unpack that together and understand exactly what your priorities are. Okay. All right, then just in ending off, we're really excited about this feature. As I said, we really think it takes something we're doing already, but just surfaces it, highlights it, and empowers a conversation with the client where they can really connect with what are the priorities we're trying to achieve and how does that connect with our financial plan. So please, if you've used it, share with us. We'd love to hear your stories of how you're using it in conversations with clients. And also if you have any feedback that you want to share with us, or if you would like to work through your specific process and talk about how you could bring priorities into your client experience, we'd love to work on that with you. So please set up some time with us. Thank you very much for joining today. I know it's end of the year, it's everyone's busy, so we really appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you for joining.